So we have Dr. Pranish speaking about teaching in a crowded OPD, must versus optional, and I think he's talking about must.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you
Good
start?
morning, everyone. So respect and revere teachers on dais and off dais. I'm very happy to kick things off. First day, first talk. So the talk is on teaching in a busy OPD. Is it an optional one or is it a must? So I'm going for must. We have to teach in a busy OPD no matter what. That is going to be my talk. So I'm a medical officer from Aravinda Hospital, Coimbatore, and most of you might know that Aravinda Hospital receives a lot of patients. It's a high volume institute. So I think I'm in a better place to justify the fact that we should teach a resident in a busy OPD. So I'm going to put forward 3 questions. Why should we teach? When should we teach? And how? So first let me start things with why. 3 reasons why we should teach a resident in a busy OPD. First and foremost is empowerment. We are going to educate a resident, be it in the OPD or outside the OPD in the classroom setting. When we educate, we empower him or her, we convert him into a competent and confident consultant. When he becomes a confident person, then I can delegate my work to him. Thereby, it will reduce my workload as well when he starts seeing patients. So it's an investment on my part to train him. Third and foremost, betterment. Not just residents get better, even I become better. As teachers, we learn the most when we teach others. So for the consultants, when they teach residents, the common endpoint is effective learning. Now let's talk about the actual practice. When should we teach? I've divided into 3 aspects: before, during, and after the OPD. Before and after the OPD are the gold mines. They are the most underutilized areas when it comes to teaching. But our concern is going to be during the OPD. This is the basic patient flow. When patient 1 goes to the visual assessment and refraction, he meets the resident number 1 at the prelim station. The resident is going to take the patient, he's going to examine the patient, ask meticulous history, and he's going to bring the patient to me, that is the MO at the final station. So there's a first scope for teaching. I will see the patient and I will correct his findings. Scope 1. When the patient 2 all by himself comes to me, I will examine the patient, and if there's any interesting finding out there, I will show and tell the resident about the findings. The second scope is show and tell. When the patient requires a specialty care, then I'll ask the resident to escort that patient to the specialty center, for example, a cornea or retina. So that is the third scope for teaching: show, tag, and teach. So we have 3 scopes for teaching in a busy OPD: see and correct, show and tell. The third is tag and teach. If we can follow any one of these 3, then we have achieved effective teaching in a busy OPD. It is possible. The last question is how? Our teaching has to be precise. It has to be clinically relevant, crisp, and concise. To deliver that kind of a crisp teaching, we have to be competent enough to know the points. This is one take-home message I want to give you guys today. It's about the quality of teaching. Now, I developed a feedback form where I can give my residents to assess on how they learn and how well I teach. So 2 parameters are being assessed. This is the basic feedback form. This is a rough sketch what I gave to my residents when I mentored them in my busy OPD. So as you can see, it has 2 parameters assessing both my teaching as well as their learning. This is the feedback form I gave to my resident actually. And you can see this resident has told that teaching in an OPD practice has proved to be more productive for him or her. And he tends to sleep in the classroom basically. So it's a honest admit from the resident here. And we all know that learning bedside or learning from the slit lamp side is the most effective form of learning. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to this: stronger the roots, tastier the fruits. If we are going to invest our time and energy in training the residents, we create capable and competent consultants, which eventually will lead to a better patient care. So thank you so much. And this is where I take my classes online. This page has more tips and tricks on teaching residents and ophthalmology in general. So thanks a lot.
So we have the next speaker who's going to counter that about teaching in crowded OPD. That's just optional. Dr. Karthik Shri Prakash.
Good morning, everybody in the panel. Thank you. So, why I feel that teaching in a crowded OPD should be just optional for residents. So, this is a typical OPD setup, and this is not just a very crowded OPD. This is a routine OPD in everyday practice is what we see. So, how would incorporating a teaching schedule for a doctor who practices in this work? Right. So the physician is very precariously balancing patient care and teaching residents. Now, if more emphasis is given on teaching residents, patient care tends to suffer. And this translates to missing clinical findings and using more empirical therapy than targeted therapy. And this can, on the long run, habituate polypharma. Well, the focus should be on patient care, but this may get affected. On the physician, we know that we've all had OPDs where we've seen 300 patients, 400 patients, and you know how dead and exhausted you are. Imagine trying to teach and see patients at the same time. Imagine how fatigued you will get. And you are done. You don't want to diagnose. You just want to pack up. You say, let's just do this. Let's just do the empirical therapy and move on. The doctor and patient relationship is something which is very sacred. And this empathy is required for any clinician. Now, we know that time needs to be spent on counseling patients, especially in ophthalmology, where telling the patients about their disease is very important. And incorporating a teaching schedule might further decrease the time available in a crowded OPD for such patients. When you have so many patients and residents are seeing thousands and thousands of patients, what happens is even when there is teaching going on, because of the gross volume and of the OPD, the resident is overwhelmed and they may not be able to grasp such findings. And they're also tired, and this can also cause disinterest in learning. And if they focus only on one case learning in a crowded OPD where there are thousands of patients, they can miss out on a variety of cases if they're only focusing on that one particular case. Now, to me, teaching in a crowded OPD should be just optional. And I feel that just by passive learning, by looking at their seniors, by looking at the consultants do, they are going to gain clinical acumen because of the sheer volume. They can maximize this learning by active participation from the resident, by regular case discussions and academic activities during the free time, and also by going back, learning, studying about the case and coming back. Now, on the clinician part, he should encourage the students from asking more and more questions when, of course, they are free and doubts, and this encourages the residents to learn better. So that's why I feel it's optional. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll have a discussion by the chairpersons on all these topics at the end of the session. So we'll go on to the next one. Do we have Dr. Sanjana Vatsa here? So she's going to talk about teaching assignments of second and third year residents. Is it a must? And she's talking in favor that it is a must.
Excuse me? It's not showing. Go there.
क्लिप कहाँ डाल
It's not showing there. Yeah. So good morning, everyone. Today I'll be talking about teaching assignments for second and third year residents. So first of all, what is an assignment? So assignment is allocating some part of the course of the study to students to work upon and to improve their knowledge. So first of all, we need to answer these questions. Should assignments be given? Second, why should they be given? And thirdly, do they have a positive or negative impact on the residents? So here I am today to say that assignments are a must for the residents and they do have a positive impact when it is being done in the right way. So how they help is that it helps them work independently, it helps them take initiative and responsibility for completing a task, and also helps them use the academic library facilities and online resources, and thus organizing and condensing the information. So because we know that the information is available in various ways in the form of books, and then we have the online journals, etc. So students are a little unaware at times as to how to access these and how to condense everything. So when an assignment is given, they systematically start working on it, and thereby they'll be able to make better use of these facilities. And it also helps in developing good research skills and helps in time management, and it gives them a sense of direction. So because medicine is so vast and ophthalmology is so vast that sometimes students are confused as to where to start, where to end, and how to go about the entire thing. So when they are given assignments, it makes it more systematic and gives them a good sense of direction, and also helps them face challenges and deal with them successfully. And when it is being done in a successful manner, it overall improves their self-confidence. So the assignments which are given will be usually in the form of clinical training assignments, surgical training, academic activities, and we also have to stress upon residents being good teachers. So not only does these assignments help the students, but also it helps the teachers, because it helps in detecting the lacunae in the students and work on it. So it also helps in assessing the progress of the students. So here I would like to stress upon that it helps in assessing. So we as teachers are here to assess the progress of students and find out their problem areas and lacunae, but not judge them. So we need to help them identify their problem areas and help them accordingly. And this overall will improve the teacher-student relationship. So the two important things that we need to stress upon when we talk about assignments are the quality and quantity. So quality is more important than the quantity. So it is not the number of assignment that matters, but it is a kind of assignments which are given to students. It should be in such a way that the students are enjoying what they're doing and they're learning from it, and not just doing it for the heck of it. So finally, I would like to say that effectiveness is defined as a practical output of teaching. So when teaching is done in the form of these assignments, there is definite effective learning. So a well-taught assignment matters not only in the classroom, but also in the broader view of profession. So thus, I would like to conclude by saying that teaching assignments for residents are a must. When it is done in the right way, will definitely have a positive impact on the students, both professionally and personally, and thus overall would improve the system of medical education. I thank you all for your patient listening.
Thank you, Sanjana. We now have Dr. Neha Goyal. Do we have Dr. Neha Goyal? So Dr. Shweta will speak on the other side.
पीपीटी आपकी किसमें सेशन इसमें तो है नहीं
अभी आ रहा था अभी यहाँ डिस्प्ले में उस वाले पे है क्या?
Can we have the next speaker get ready in the meantime? Dr. Dharamveer Singh Chaudhary. Is Dr. Dharamveer here? Dr. Dr. Anjana Somnath is here. You already loaded your presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be speaking on teaching assignments for second year and third year residents, optional. Now, residency is a vital period of medical education for the students as they learn to provide optimal care to the patient under the supervision of faculty members, and they develop and transform themselves into physician scholars who care. The most important thing is that they learn to take care for the patient, family, and a diverse community, and they create and integrate new knowledge into practice. And care is something that is not learned through books, it is learned in OPDs while seeing the patients. MCI has recognized 4 aims of residency program: clinical teaching, surgical training, academic activities, and to train the residents as a teacher. And we all know that the more we use our brain, the more it develops. And students learn a lot when they read or practice something by themselves, and anything that involves students into doing things and thinking about the things they are doing, that is active learning, helps them learn more. There can be various methods of learning, and teaching assignment is one of them. Now, the purpose of assignment, it should be clear in the mind, whether it is to increase learning capabilities of student or it is just to keep the student busy. Now, ideal assignment should directly relate to the accomplishing the course objective. It should allow the students to brainstorm. It should have clear expectation that in what format they have to submit it, what is the end result end result expected out of them, and what are the evaluation tools. And they should be small assignments, and you should always give them a model assignment in which format they have to submit. And when these all objectives have to be fulfilled, it is a very tedious job for the teachers, especially the medical teachers, to formulate such an assignment. The teachers, they have to look OPD, they have to do OT. Beside that, they also have to teach the student, not only the undergraduate, also the postgraduates. And to formulate such assignments, it is really very tough. And then you have to check them also. And also for the students, especially the residents, they have to go through multiple resources. Now, children, students, residents, they are always in time crisis. They have paucity of time. They have to work a lot, and they should have presenting skills. And all this, they have to go through various books. And we had all, when I came into first year PG, our teachers and our seniors used to say ophthalmology is very volatile. It goes away if you don't see the patients. Now, the limited hours of library clashes with the duty and OPD and OT timings, and when the students are free in the evening, the library are usually closed. And so they have to go through unverified sources of internet where they usually copy and paste and make the assignment, and they don't go through the books. So the usefulness of assignments gets diminished by all these things. And a study was done and it was published in IGO, and feedback was taken from the final postgraduates, and they all said that the case presentation with demonstrations with wet labs is more preferred technique in comparison to assignments alone. Though teaching assignments give a backdrop knowledge on residents' work laboriously, but it does not enhance the overall dimension of clinical knowledge. Thank you so much. This is a small cartoon I saw. This is Thomas Cook train, and she is telling that actually, sir, we prefer to be called helpful engines. We deserve to be treated as person with inherent dignity and not the tools to be used. The same applies to the assignments in residency program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have Dr. Dharam Singh? Chaudhary? No. So we can start with Dr. Anjana Somnath, who's speaking about everyday bedside teaching for residents is just optional.
Doctor?
Doctor, first one.
First one, doctor.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be talking about bedside teaching for residents, if we have to do it every day or not. So we know that the word patience is being derived from the Latin word patiens, which means the one who suffers. So therefore, we as doctors or ophthalmologists, we should definitely reduce the pain of the patient and even the anxiety rather than increasing it. Now let's see a bedside clinic which is being conducted in an environment which is crowded or the rooms are too small or noisy. So conducting a bedside clinic in such an environment, the students will definitely not be able to concentrate and they will be distracted to the surrounding environment. At times you may have patients who are not available in the ward. They might be out for investigations, and making the patient stay back because we have to conduct a bedside clinic will further increase the anxiety among the patient and the person who is accompanying the patient. And at times you may also have patients for the day when they may not have any significant clinical findings, and conducting a bedside clinic because it has to be done will not be fruitful for the residents at all. Now let's see a bedside clinic which is being conducted every day. It increases the student-teacher ratio. The prognosis of this disease cannot be discussed in front of the patient. And if the patient cannot understand the language in which we are communicating with the residents, it will definitely increase the misunderstandings and misinterpretations. And if the student ratio is very high, the students, there will always be a set of students who will always be distracted to the surrounding environment. So what happens to the patients in the OPD when a bedside clinic is being conducted? The waiting time definitely increases, and you definitely do not get support from the nursing staff. So instead, we can have a bedside teaching which is conducted in a conference room where both the student and the teacher is comfortable, and you can discuss everything about the disease. So now we have an improvement in technology and everyone has a smartphone. So everybody relies on the information available on the internet. And you have videos on examination skills, and the students are already aware of the examination skill before you want to transfer the skill to them. So there's no point in wasting our time and teaching the transfer of the examination skill. And we have research which is given more importance than bedside teaching. And I think there's inadequate appreciation for teachers who transfer their skill. And therefore, taking all these points into consideration, I think that everyday bedside teaching is not really required. Whether conducted or not, the postgraduates definitely learn during the course of their program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have Dr. Dharam Singh Chaudhary here still? No? So we'll go on to the next presentation. Formal teaching of soft skills. Is it must versus optional? And speaking for must is Dr. Nitin Balkrishnan. Is Dr. Anshuman Gehlot here? Yeah.
आप अपना कनेक्टर इनका कनेक्ट
ARC and Dr. Partha Biswas for having me here. Now, what are soft skills? Soft skills basically are personal attributes, personality traits, inherent social cues, and communication abilities needed for success in any profession. They characterize how a person interacts in his or her relationship with others. Hard skills are learned, whereas soft skills are similar to emotions or insights and allow people to read others. Now, these are some of the top 10 soft skills which are very, very important for the medical profession. I'll enunciate one by one. Clear communication, that is both verbal and written communication is very important. The physician should be able to articulate in clear terms, enunciating, speaking loudly enough, should have an upbeat tone, and the communication essentially needs to be positive. The physician also needs good listening skills to assess the patient's needs, to demonstrate active listening by body language and responses, eye contact, nodding when the patient says something, asking clarifying questions, making the patient feel heard, and also have telephonic skills where you don't interrupt the patient when he's asking, but to respond to all the questions. A physician needs to be also taught about self-control, how to remain cool and calm even when the patient's tone, even the patient is not so cool, and to tone down the conversation. Patience and self-control to prevent saying something inappropriate, and not to take things personally when the patient says something nasty about the physician. A physician also needs to have a positive attitude to know and convey benefits of all the products and services. If the patient has a problem with any product or service, to focus on how you can help the patient and be proactive and optimistic. The patient always stays positive if you are proactive and optimistic. A physician needs to be assertive by taking control of the situation efficiently. Being meek or passive, the patient will never have faith in you. Being aggressive and demanding can offend the patient. So one needs to be taught to speak with a strong and steady voice, ask direct questions, and keep a track of what you need to do. A physician should have a good skill in conflict resolution and be a creative problem solver, should be able to understand patients' problems clearly, think creatively, customize solutions for individual patients, and if cannot solve a problem, probably escalate the problem to a senior, and also then follow up with the patient to find out whether the issue has been resolved. Empathy is something which is very, very important. It need not be stressed. It basically means to understand what the patient says and feels and recognize the patient's emotional state. If a physician finds himself or herself struggling to convey empathy, the best thing to be taught is to put yourself in the patient's shoes. How you would want to be treated over there, that is what empathy is all about. Depersonalization is something where you need to be friendly, but do not share the patient's life story. When the patient explains an issue, do not respond with your own related problems. Just respond by saying, I understand, I know how you feel. Taking responsibility, being able to say sorry even when the mistake is not yours. This is very, very important. Any apology, however agitated a patient is, it makes the patient feels better. A physician also needs to be taught about having a good sense of humor. That is, it makes the interaction very, very enjoyable. And even when the patient cracks a silly joke, just to laugh and chuckle along with the patient, and not to laugh at the patient when the patient makes a mistake or when the patient is having trouble in understanding. There are some other soft skills like grooming, personal appearance, poise, sensitivity, memory, fast learning, diligence, lie detection, attention to detail, critical thinking, and feedback. So what is the role of a soft skill educator? A soft skill educator should be able to assess the candidate's existing soft skills and train and instill lacking soft skills. In short, polishing a raw stone into a 24-carat diamond. So basically an assessment, scoring what sort of soft skills the physician already has, and then try and improve this and repeat this again and again. Now this cannot be done unless a soft skill is taught right from the residency days. And this has been found in majority of the industries, and this is basically research done at service industries, and therefore medical profession being a service industry, this just applies to us, that 92% of the people felt that soft skills is as important as hard skills in delivering good results in a service industry. So therefore, the notion is, the people have a notion that having a soft skill doesn't guarantee you a job, but not having them definitely puts you at a real risk of not even getting an offer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have, speaking on the other side, that formal teaching of soft skills is just optional, and we have Dr. Anshuman Gehlot.
आप उधर की साइड जाइए, इधर खोल देना इनका.
Thank you, panel, and good morning, everybody. I'll be talking about formal teaching of soft skills, whether it is a must or it is an optional thing to do. So first of all, the big question we have to ask is it even in our control to teach soft skills to someone? And why is it that we call such skills as soft skills?
अरे वहाँ से कर यार तू
The preceding speaker talked about a number of soft skills. You know, the list is never ending. You can keep on searching for soft skills and you will get so many words which you have never heard of, so many things that you need to understand what those are actually. So what are soft skills? First we have to know. This is an abstract list what I got while preparing this presentation. So a few of the soft skills mentioned here, like empathy, compassion, integrity, curiosity, they are innate traits and they are a part of your upbringing and the parenting which you have received. So these are the traits which are there in your personality right from the beginning. Take an example of empathy. When do you start learning empathy? You teach empathy to your 2-year-old son when you tell him not to kill an ant. He asks you why. You tell him because it feels pain. So you're indirectly telling him that you feel the pain what an ant feels. That is empathy. So that's where the teaching of soft skills starts. There are a few other soft skills like dependability, creativity, flexibility, innovation. They come with your further life during your training days. So they are also formed as a part of your personality. Other soft skills like leadership, teamwork, problem solving, conflict resolution, they are learnt and developed with practice and with experience. So how do we teach soft skills? Through lectures, demonstrations, bedside, or in OPD. It's very hard to find out a point where to start thinking on how do we teach soft skills. Let's make the question easier. How do we learn soft skills? How did you learn soft skills? So the point which I'm trying to make is soft skills are not to be taught. They are self-learned. So self-learning is the process through which we get the soft skills what we need to have. And it is not in our control to teach soft skills to someone. Soft skills have always been a part of our PG training. You all know that residents do learn soft skills during their training. And it is unknowingly a part of our curriculum. It is just that the soft skills cannot be taught through lectures and the demonstrations, and they are learnt only through observations, looking what is happening around. So just taking an example of empathy. Suppose a 70-year-old patient comes to you and he's suffering from say AMD, both eyes, and he's having decreased vision because of that. And he explains to you that he has been a teacher all of his life and he has been teaching students all of his life. Now he's retired, and because of his condition he cannot even read a single paper now. He needs help in reading also, and he tells you this and he breaks down in front of you. So at that point, just a simple sentence coming from you that I understand your problem, sir, I'll do whatever I can to help you. So just simply listening to the patient's problem will go a long way, because these are the things which this patient cannot share with others. It's only you to whom he will share this thing. So simply active listening and implying that you understand will go a long way. Confidence in speaking will come along with knowledge. The more you read, the more knowledge you attain, the more you will be confident in speaking, the more confident you will be while advising a treatment to the patient, while advising a surgery to the patient. Few more words: creativity, curiosity, learning through observation, taking calculated risk. We all go through all these learning of these soft skills during our PG period. Creativity. When you tell your PG resident to make a presentation, you give him 10 days and you tell him you do a research and prepare whatever you can and present this topic in a class. So he will go and research the topic, do whatever he can. He will try to explain the audience by however ways he can. So that's creativity. Curiosity. The more you read, the more curious you are. So, and you always encourage your PGs to ask questions to you. Learning through observation. Most of the skills which we get in OPD, we get from our seniors. Taking calculated risks. Suppose you get a canalicular tear in emergency trauma, and the first year resident is there on duty. He will think that, okay, can I do it or not? Maybe he knows, but he does not have the necessary skills. He calls up the second year resident and he says, okay, I'll be there, you start it. So that's where he gains that confidence that he can take that risk. If he's not able to do, senior is there, he'll come and do it. So that's where you learn how to take calculated risks. Coming to problem solving, you start doing surgeries in your final year, you make some complications, and then you have a senior or maybe a resident or your teacher with you. They will tell you how to manage those complications. So these are the problem solving skills which you get during your residency period. Teamwork. Suppose you are organizing a meet in your department, your hospital, you give him some part of the organization process, and he will learn during that process. Innovation is out of the box thinking. It is the residents only which can have an out of the box thinking, because they don't have that much of bookish knowledge that seniors do have, we have. They are the real people who can really think out of the box. So the reason why such skills are known as soft skills is because they cannot be explained through traditional hard ways of teaching. Learning of a soft skill is a continuous process. Teaching of soft skill doesn't need to be active. It is a spontaneous passive process. It is learning through observation. It is a continuous and endless process, and it is a part of your life. It starts from the age of 1.5 or 2 years, and it goes on and on. It never ends. It has always been a part of our current teaching model of PG training. So soft skills need not be taught, because soft skills are self-learned. So coming to the topic once again, teaching of soft skills, must versus optional. Do we really have a choice? Is it really in our control? I leave the point to you. Thank you.
So we'll have a discussion on this with the chairpersons at the end of the next two debating sessions. So didactic lecture versus interactive classes. So we have Dr. Amrish Darak with us. So he's going to talk about only didactic.
Good morning, everyone. I won't even take first 4 minutes. Basically, whenever teaching happens, so it requires didactic lecture only, because it's a time-tested method, where the oldest method where a teacher teaches the student. So most commonly used, it's most the content-oriented, and where the students are passive listener. So teacher-centered method always is a preferred method whenever the teaching process is involved. Advantage, as we know, the teacher is always an expert in the field. He has the experience, so he has that theoretical knowledge also, and his practical experience. So he knows how to fill up that gap between the knowledge and the application of knowledge. And whenever this information is to be shared, it always should be through a didactic lecture. So he knows the topic, he knows how to elaborate that, he knows how to explain that, he won't deviate it from his topic, and it will be a great and large amount of information will be shared and a summarize at the end of those lecture process. So a teacher, again, a most accessible and experienced person, so he will have a good control over the material study. Now, with this process, through this process, you can address the large number of crowd, so most of the large number of students also can get benefited at the same time. Difficult topics again become easy when an experienced teacher is there. So well-experienced expert, he has that practical experience as I shared. So when a teacher is talking to crowd, so people, students are more attentive. Knowledge gaps, as I discussed, are well filled because theory you can learn, theory you can read, but the practical experience, you require a didactic lecture where the person, an experienced person will share his knowledge with it. Proper research and study updates he can always discuss. So many a times when you come across a didactic lecture, there are less chances that topic may get deviated to other. So an experienced expert with large amount of information will always give a deep understanding to all the students. Again, when you share your practical experience, you will evoke interest about the topic amongst the students. Thought process will become positive. Through didactic lecture, it will give an insight to all the students and will give a deep understanding about the topic. Interactive lectures, we know, interactive lectures or interactive talk can happen where both the listener as well as a lecturer who has knowledge and they are sharing their experiences. But when it comes to teaching, probably for interactive, a student has to be more responsible, well-read, done few practical things, and then this interactive lecture can help. But unfamiliar questions when are raised, it will increase the vulnerability. And most of the time in interactive session, the control over the content is reduced. Quality of material, most of the time interactive lectures, there may be a deviation of topic, subject from the main topic, and difficult to ask the right questions on the concerned topic. Whenever a topic is changed or the questions are different, there is a possibility that there may be a deviation of the topic. Again, interactive session happens good when there is a lesser number of crowd. If you want to teach a large crowd, large students, so basically didactic lecture is the choice. Interaction, you require extra staff also to coordinate this interaction. So I think didactic lectures is the only choice when the teaching process is to be happened. Thank you very much.
Next we have, talking about only interactive, Dr. Abdul Waris. Is he here? Do we have one other speaker whom we missed? Dr. Dharamveer Singh Chaudhary, are you here? So he was to be talking about everyday bedside teaching for residents, a must. So after this, we can have all the chairpersons coming up and we can discuss all the presentations and elicit some audience participation. It's taking time. We can.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, convener and chairpersons, my colleagues. Sorry for the late coming. Can I have some? First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about the bedside everyday lectures for the bedside rounds for the resident. Sorry for this delay, technical delay too. Bedside grand rounds, the best teaching place. I would like to quote a Chinese proverb. When I hear, I remembered for one day. When I read, I remembered for a month. And when I saw, I remembered it forever. History. Sir William Osler from Johns Hopkins University introduced first time the bedside teaching as a new approach to clinical education in 19th century. Residents learned as faculty passed from patient to patient, explaining their methods of diagnosis and treatment and sharing them with everyone. Participation increased, and when these rounds moved from bedside to auditoriums, the traditional approach to grand rounds was created. By definition, a formal meeting at which physicians discuss the clinical case of one or more patients is termed as bedside grand rounds. Bedside rounds originated as a part of residency training, wherein new information was taught and clinical reasoning skills were enhanced. Bedside rounds today are an integral part of medical education. They present clinical problems in medicine by focusing on current or interesting cases. They are also sometimes utilized for dissemination of new research informations. Research on adult learning has shown that the adult learners must feel the need to learn, participate actively in the learning process, and have a sense of progress towards their goals. They also prefer to share the responsibility for planning and organizing their learning experiences. UG Medical Education has adapted to adult learning principles in the form of problem-based learnings. Patients with a complicated illnesses may benefit from a second opinion too, in case of diagnostic doubts, and may feel more involved in such instances. Unlike other specialties, we all know the ophthalmology is highly privileged. We have fairly healthy patients to interact with us, with their history quite well. We can see almost all the parts of the eye around and come to clinical diagnosis with relative ease. Teaching in an ophthalmic clinic need not be very elaborate at the expense of efficiency. In just a few minutes, a good clinical teacher can direct students' attention to what is important. while simultaneously providing clinical care. Bedside examination and teaching seems to have declined for a variety of reasons in recent years. Some of them are increased patient volume, increased emphasis on electronic EMR recordings, investigations, etc. Some physicians fear that bedside teaching compromises patient satisfaction with their care, despite evidences to the contrary side, whereas others are limited by their own suboptimal bedside teaching skills. We end up in such scenarios where the bedside teaching is not present, we end up with treating topographies, visual fields, OCTs and CT scans, not the eyes and not the patients. Patient primary symptoms often remains unaddressed in our enthusiasm to diagnose the disease and treat it. To summarize, the fervent power of bedside teaching is that it makes patients and their illnesses tangible, thus helping the students to comprehend the disease in its entirety. History taking, physical examination, logical reasoning, clinical diagnosis, communication, professionalism, touch, respect, empathy, and most importantly, what it takes and means to be a doctor are best taught, exemplified, role modeled, and learned in the presence of patients and not in a conference room or a lecture theatre. To conclude, the format and objectives of bedside rounds and expectations for what this type of lecture is intended to accomplish have changed since the inception of this approach to group teaching in medicine in the late 19th century, and these changes have parallel changes in the practice. Ophthalmologists, especially medical teachers, should come up with new strategies for restoring these bedside rounds, which may help clinical departments revitalize this once important approach for teaching and promoting professional development in medicine. Thank you.
May I now call upon all the chairpersons to come up on the stage and discuss for the next 10 minutes all these presentations. And after that, we'll have a keynote address by Dr. Ashok Grover.
Everyone. I first apologize for my being a chairperson. I came little late. Sorry for that. I listened few presentations, and they were good. So initially, I would like to start the thing with sir, because he has attended since beginning. So there should not be any confusion, and I will participate after in the discussion. That will be better.
Having heard most of the speakers, I feel that the talks were very good. They were very fruitful. The main thing is there is always a line in between. It's neither one nor the other. The truth doesn't lie on one side of the coin. There is somewhere, it's not in black and white. There are shades of gray which have to be understood. So whether it was regarding the bedside learning, whether it was regarding the didactic lectures, you have to have a combination of everything. And I think all these points were well brought about in everyone's talk, that there were points stressed in favor of didactic lectures, there were points stressed in favor of bedside learning. Both are important. It's not that only one thing is important. So I think that was the key for practically every topic which was spoken about.
Yes, sir. Hello. Hello. Is it working? Yeah. So, in my opinion, teaching in a crowded OPD is a must, but it shouldn't for all the patients. This is what I feel from my student days. And regarding teaching assignment is a must for the second and third year PGTs. It's also a must, but it should be supervised by the seniors. Otherwise, the juniors can learn that things. And thirdly, everyday bedside teaching is a must, as a different type of patients come, and actually what happens for not all the patients. And regarding the soft skill, what you have told, it's very much difficult to control the laugh. You must be a superhuman for that.
We'll have a last quick comment from sir, and then we'll shift to the.
So,
Anish.
I agree that each mode of teaching has its own advantage and disadvantage. The teaching should be combination of all methods, so that in which manner the students gets benefited with the available time, whether it's in OPD or in the bedside or in the operation theatre. Each skill has to be supervised before the students learn fully. So that's what my opinion on this.
Yes, combination is always, it has to be a combination, because for a disease process you should know the signs, symptoms. So theoretical knowledge one resident should have, and then if we elicit the signs, if we give them in practical way, then it will be a audio visual like PPT presentation. So it will be in their mind, that theory theory will be in their mind, and they are learning by viewing the patient, examining the patient, and they will understand in better way. So it should be a combination, I feel so.
So one more thing, a little bit differ with the person who took the topic, didactic lectures about the teaching methods. So in his slides he mentioned it is like a teacher-centered. So nowadays the MC insists that teaching method should be student-centered, rather than it should be a teacher-centered. That's what I want to convey this.
Thank you very much. We are running short of time, and I feel it is privilege that Sir is speaking and I am sitting here. Sir, please continue.
Thank you all for wonderful discussion. We had some viewpoints put forth very, very beautifully, which point out the pros and cons of each of those things. As has been pointed out, we really need them all in different combinations and with the right kind of atmosphere for each of them. So I'll be speaking today on the lecture skills, and I'm sure you all have done it more than me, and you can do it better than me, but we all need to pool our points of what we think works best for us. We learn it as we go along. So the objective of this talk is to prepare the audience to be effective and powerful speakers and communicators with their learners. So how do you go about giving an effective lecture? You need to be well prepared. You need to tailor your talk to the level of the audience and prepare yourself for that particular audience. You need to maintain your focus on exactly what you want to communicate. You need to engage your audience in your talk. You need to be getting all kinds of feedbacks which are during the talk. You look at the audience response and subsequent feedback from them regarding how you can improve your subsequent talks. And you need to therefore modify your way of giving talks. Most important is to be prepared and not to be found napping like me. Last evening I received an email from Partho saying that these are your subjects in this teacher's session, and I found that I had missed this in the program book, so this was not in my list of things I had prepared. That was about 10 p.m. So he said, you have to give a talk. I said, I can't. And he said, no, you can. So I had to prepare this from 10 in the night. I slept and then started in the morning. So I was not as well prepared as I should be. Okay, so how do you get prepared for a lecture? You must outline very clear objectives of what that talk is going to communicate about, and you must also be able to emphasize its importance to the audience. This we have already said, it should be tailored to the nature of the audience. If I am talking to postgraduates, it has to be a different level. If I am talking to teachers, it has to be a different level. And if I am speaking in an international conference, it will be at a different level. So always develop an outline and prepare the audio visuals as necessary. This goes without saying. And if I'm a beginner and I'm a little nervous, it is best to know what first 4 lines I'm going to speak by the time I get my bearings. So, but it is always important in a lecture to have only a few limited points that you can communicate in an 8-minute or 10-minute or a 20-minute talk. If you go on to too many things, you can't really communicate the carry-home points. And you must communicate using examples, analogies, visuals, so as to have the thing sink in. This is very important. Like, for example, if you're talking about nystagmus, it is ideal to have a video at the same time. You should limit your words or text to the minimum possible. If a figure can communicate it, the same thing, you can see how much better the focus will be when you point out on this rather than on this slide. And figures, charts, graphs are always an effective communicator, provided you can focus on the right thing to the audience. And having a good clarity of thoughts is vital. We'll emphasize some of these points further. So what are the things that a teacher needs to have an effective lecture? He needs to have a good knowledge. He needs to have skills in teaching. But at the same time, having a positive attitude, positive disposition towards the job is very, very important, vital. So you need to emphasize your key points in the beginning so that the audience gets focused to what is coming during the course of the talk when you talk on individual subjects, and at the end in the form of a summary. It is important to bring the audience round to your talk, to bring them to have your attention, and that is by putting in a quote or a dramatic visual in the beginning, or an anecdote, or talking about Parthaviswas and not having known the subject, or something like that. Integrate your visuals with your talk subject very well, and wherever possible, in smaller groups, you can have them divided into groups to discuss specific things, and have peers communicate to each other on things. But these are only in limited situations where you have a longer format. It is always very useful when you're talking about a subject to integrate it with what the audience already knows. So if you have discussed something in the previous lecture, or if there is some experience that they've had, if you can link it to that, it's much easier for them to integrate that. You need to be enthusiastic about your subject, you need to feel involved, and you need to have the audience involved. And therefore, appropriate voice modulation for emphasis, correct pauses are all very important. Eye contact is important, not a general eye contact, but specific contact with a few people lasting 4-5 seconds is important in communication. It has to be paced in a way that the audience can grasp. If it is too rapid, if we are flitting from subjects to the one subject to the other, again the effectivity will go down. Give the audience the time to think of what you have said, and be at that pace. The feedback that you get during the lecture is by various non-verbal communications, whether people are taking notes, whether they are taking pictures, whether they are responding when you say something, whether they show a response to your humor. So all those things tell you that you have the audience in your attention span, and you also need to keep your timing to a level where the attention span is maintained and not go on and on. So also it is important to get feedback by asking questions. Like at the end of the day, you could ask your audience, what was it that was most important to you? What was it that you did not get? What was it that confused you? And things like that. If you can get that kind of feedback, it is vital for your going forward for further lectures. Periodically keep asking about things, but not about minutiae, but about the broader aspects of what the objectives of the talk were. So to summarize, for an effective talk, it is important to have it tailored to the audience that you are addressing. Keep the subject and material focused to the objective. If you deviate, you lose the audience. Prepare well, unlike me. Structure well with clear objectives which are pointed out at the beginning, correlated well during the subject matter, and summarized at the end. Make sure your audience is engaged in the lecture. And feedback and acting on the feedback is critical to success. Ending with an image of Antarctica. Look at the beautiful ice and the penguins. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. It didn't look like it has been made overnight. Thanks a lot. So.